Evolution.org Hardcore 2.0 is coming your way. This is episode 142. Today we're going to talk about Is My Life Really Better on the SARS Part 2 by Euro Pharma. So if you haven't checked out Part 1, which would be episode 141, please go back and check that out first. I recommend doing that. This way you'll understand what we're talking about. So in the Part 1, we talked about 5 different experiences that a steroid user who is really excited about using steroids and really loves using steroids. He's a young steroid user. And he talks about different things he loved. So this one, we're going to continue with that. And we're going to talk about 2 more things that he experienced on his cycle. And then we're going to talk about 3 different things that he did not like about using steroids. So we're going to talk about the hows and the whys and why he's experiencing it and educate about why they experience it. We're going to talk about ways to improve all the good and the bad that comes with using steroids. And of course, we're also going to talk about Euro Pharmacy's quality gear. And we're going to talk about why it's important to make sure you're using good quality gear from Euro Pharma. So let's start with the first one. He says, I feel pumps when I train versus none when I'm not on. So when you go in the gym and you leave the gym feeling like $1,000,000, you got those endorphins going, you got all those feel good hormones being popped out after you exercise. You also have, when you're using anabolic steroids, the way they help partition and send blood into the muscles and send nutrients into the muscles and blow up your muscles. That's not your imagination. When you're on in the gym and you're getting these explosive pumps and you're doing drop sets and then you finish out the workout doing some bicep curls just to get a nice pump so you can walk out of the gym with your cut off shirt with your veins popping out of your arms and you get those explosive pumps. There's really nothing like it, especially when you're using different types of steroids. Some of the best steroids that I've used to cause pumps, Dianabol causes some insane pumps. Anavar, Winstrol, even Tren causes some very unique Tren pumps. And these pumps really, there's nothing like it versus being off steroids. Now you can do a lot of things off steroids to help with the pumps, like beets, for example, they help pumps, carb manipulation, water manipulation, doing different things with that, doing different things with vitamins and minerals. And there's different ways you can do it, but there's nothing quite like the same as the pumps you experience when you're on steroids. So, not experiencing those pumps when you come off steroids can definitely change up your workout and the way you feel, not only during your workout when you're doing those high volume drop sets, and then walking out of the gym where you can barely, on arm day, barely grab your steering wheel to drive because your arms and forearms are so pumped and they feel like they're going to explode out of your arms. And then, so those are the things that he's experiencing. And that's, I kind of get it. I get where he's coming from. And it is a hard thing to not have when you're not on steroids. So I can see why he would be almost mentally addicted to having those steroid pumps. Mobster?
Yeah, I was going to say exactly what Steve said in terms of what you can do to get a good pump. Okay, so just staying hydrated, Steve. But we know specific steroids have specific effects with regards to more oxygen carried. Literally, we know that certain steroids, in fact, one of the arguable side effects is the thickening of the blood. We know that these can enhance. Me and Steve have talked about the depot pumps, the Anavar pumps, and so on and so forth. I suspect, as written, is an exaggeration. Of course, he gets pumps when he's not on steroids. But I also see, and this is part of what Steve tied in at the end of his comments, there is an argument to the sensation. And we talk about steroids compared to, say, for example, certain recreational narcotic type drugs, etc., not being addictive in and of themselves. But what can be addictive is how you look in the mirror. What can be addictive is that level of strength. And it can be something that you need to learn to cope with over time. So that would include, Steve, that whole quote unquote feeling full, feeling pumped. I mean, what do we sometimes see on the forums is, and I've seen this especially with younger members, and not recently, Steve, it's been a while now, but you used to get people saying, how can I feel pumped all day long? If I go to the gym, the pump lasts for an hour. If I'm very, very lucky, it's an hour and a half. I'd love to be pumped when I walk down a club because of how they feel, that way they hold themselves, chest sticking out, arms akimbo, like they've got carpets under each arm. But literally, and a t-shirt and the clothing just feels pleasantly tight. Can I make that happen all day long? And the reality is no. So what can sometimes happen on certain steroids is arguable, Steve, but you probably have a quote, a slightly longer lasting pump. And of course, you should be physically bigger. You should be that little bit more muscular, a little bit leaner. But if you're on a bulk, for example, Steve, you should feel that little bit bigger, quarter of an inch, half an inch. And that's literally all we're talking about sometimes, Steve. A quarter or half an inch, giving you that sensation of. I'm going to talk about borderline being sexual because of, in the same way, it'd be like walking around with a semi all day long when it comes to having an erection. You certainly feel very confident and so on and so forth. And Steve just prompted me, and this is been almost an attraction. Arnold said in the 1975 documentary Pumping Iron, and I believe he was being very clever in his way, Steve, at promoting the sport of bodybuilding. And he said something, he's sitting with his striped t-shirt on a 70s sofa, camera's a couple of inches away from his face, or so it would seem. And I think he's been asked off camera about the pump. Talk about the pump, Arnold. And he says, well, the pump's great. If I pump my chest, I go to the gym, I work out, I pump my chest, I feel full as a house. I think he says something along those lines. But when he gets into it, he says, the pump's like coming, meaning that obvious sensation for men and for women, but specifically for men, where, you know, your ejaculate's rushing down the vas deferens tubes, is about to do its business from the prostate, from the testicles, and that moment just before you come, that sensation of the old wadger being full as a fucking house, and you're just about to do the very, very pleasant business with your sexual partner. And he says, for me, the pump is like coming. Can you imagine if I train my biceps, I'm pumped. If I train my chest, I'm pumped. If I train my back, I'm pumped. And I'm walking around like this all day long. And so he kind of he infers it, it's sexual. And he says, so can you imagine the pleasure I have? I'm coming all day long. I'm pumped all day long. Now, of course, this is an exaggeration. In reality, it lasts, as I said, hour and a half if you're very, very lucky in terms of the actual pump. And certainly there's an argument to be made for being that little bit bigger, that little bit more muscular, especially when you're on steroids, but especially when you're training in a certain particular way to have that pump. Now, I'm a strength athlete, Steve, and even I will make sure that my arms feel fucking pumped. I will sometimes wear a slightly tighter t-shirt or a cut-off or something like that, just because I think it's one of those weird things that even strength athletes and weightlifters and shit like to feel good when they train at the gym, and especially when you're training a smaller muscle. And it's kind of easy, especially for arms, Steve, to get a nice pump in your arms compared to, say, for example, training your fucking ass off on quads or hamstrings or something. You will get a pump, but it's so fucking goddamn brutal. It's that much harder to do so. So arms, chest, a little bit of back, maybe even shoulders, filling out your t-shirt is a pleasant experience. So we get it. And again, what did we say in the last show, Steve? When we talk about any of the things we're talking about today, there are some sentiments that all athletes, all people that train, mostly our demographic here on this podcast, will feel some sort of, they'll say, yeah, that's true. I like those things. But he's also 23 years of age. So when we talked about on the last show, the amount of hours it gets, the way men are intimidated, Steve and I, we're a little bit older. I'm a bit older than Steve. We're like, calm your ass down, bitch. You're 23. Of course you think like that. But certainly when it comes to pump, Steve, I would argue I'm 60. This guy's 23. We've got this in common. We like being pumped at the gym. But is it all day long when he's on steroids? No. Is it all the time even when he's on steroids? Is he walking around at the supermarket or getting gas or down at the, where he works or whatever, or at college? No. But certainly the sensation of being full and muscular, and especially when he's on PEDs, there's probably a sense of truth to that. And also, I mean, this is the whole point for some of us, Steve. Surely, and especially if you're a bodybuilder, surely this is part of the fucking point for you going to the gym. You don't want to feel normal. You don't want to look normal. Steve and I have talked about obesity in society. I don't want to be obese. Steve doesn't want to be obese. Most of the people listening to the show, even if they are obese, want to be in better shape. And the idea that you can walk around in better shape with broad shoulders, with a small waist, muscular, and that's men and fucking women, Steve. The idea that women look at you in a certain way if you're a woman, women look at you a certain way if you're a man because you're in shape is kind of the fucking reason why we do what we do. So I don't know necessarily that I would agree with him on the pumps uh, being different on and off in and of itself, but certainly the way that you feel, and also Steve and I tied in with this in the part one, that little bit of a sensation of how it feels to be on testosterone, how you perceive yourself, how you're putting yourself out into the world. And if you're putting yourself out into the world feeling like an alpha, feeling like a sort of an OG or whatever the fuck you want to call it, because you're on testosterone, feeling a little bit more confident, and at 23, Steve, certainly cocksure and attractive to women, and you add a tiny bit of a pump to that on or off, yeah, I get it. I understand it. But again, it's one of those calm down, bitch. If you can't be on all the time, you shouldn't be on all the time. Um, I'm not sure necessarily it's a selling point as such, but it will certainly be sound and feel attractive, especially when you're 23 years of age. What do you think on that, Steve?
Yeah, and this kind of segues into our next one, Mobster. And this one, he says, I actually get results in the gym and are motivated to lift. And look, if you've never trained naturally for a long period and went through the ups and downs of training, there's all kinds of things. It's not going to be an improvement in a linear fashion. It gets frustrated. A lot of people say, "Oh, I'm frustrated. I hit a plateau, and let me hop on steroids." Well, at the end of the day, that's normal for you to hit a plateau. We don't improve linearly, and that's just not how it works. And we've talked about Mobster and I, we've talked about that story. I thought it came out of Scotland, but Mobster said no, it came out of Greece about the guy who bought a little baby cow, and every day he'd go in his backyard and lift the cow up. And as the
Yeah.
cow got bigger,
Milo of Crotania, the restless slash Greek shepherd, whatever the fuck he was. Yeah.
yeah. So you can look up that story. But as the cow grew, pretty soon the cow grew to 2,000, 3,000 pounds. He was still able to lift it because every day it would be a linear thing where he'd improve. But what's actually happens in real life, if you were to attempt that, the cow would get big enough where you would no longer be able to lift it anymore. And or you'd lift it and then you'd probably break your back or something trying to lift it, or herniate a disc. So I mean that's just not how it works. So there's going to be ups and downs, but if you use steroids, this is why guys who use steroids at a really young age, when they quit steroids, they'll quit training at the same time because then it becomes impossible to train without steroids. So for him to need steroids to get results in the gym, number one, and to be motivated to lift, that's a signal that he's using the steroids as a crutch, and we don't want to do that. It would be like giving your teenage kid a fancy or fast car for their birthday at 16 or 17 years old. And then once they become an adult and they leave the house and go out on their own, you ask for the car back, and now they got to support themselves. They have to pay their own rent, they have to pay their own utilities, they got to buy their own car, and they're not going to be able to afford a fancy car anymore. They're going to have to buy like a Hyundai or a Honda or just like a Toyota truck or something, you know? They're not going to be able to afford a nice car. And then they go back to driving that, and they're like, wow, this is a huge difference. I got so used to driving a Lamborghini, now I have to drive a fucking Toyota truck. It's just like not the same thing. I'm not getting the attention from the women. I'm not accelerating from 0 to 60 in fucking 2 seconds. I don't have luxury in the car, to show off to my friends. So it's a big change, and a lot of people can't accept that. So it becomes hard to really, have that downgrade. So this is why, it's really good to do it. And it's just not me and Mobster saying it. I trained for, I'd say, about 13 years before I ever touched steroids. Yeah, so I started training at 14, 15. I didn't touch steroids till I was 28 or 29. So that was, 13, 14, 15 years before I touched steroids. So I learned the ups and downs of training. I learned the ups and downs of life and that's going to happen. So once I did use the steroids, I was able to appreciate the steroids. Just like you shouldn't give your kid a nice car. My first car was a Hyundai that my dad got me at an auction. It was a piece of junk, but I appreciated that Hyundai a lot, and it got me from point A to point B. And I really liked the gas mileage, by the way. And then when I got older and I started making my own money, I was able to go buy a nice car, and I was able to appreciate that nice car. So it's the same thing. So natural training is like that Hyundai, and then once you start using steroids, then it's like getting that fancy car and earning that car and feeling grateful for that car. And I think that's what you miss out on when you use steroids at a young age. And again, we're doing a steroid podcast. So by all means, I'm not saying don't use steroids ever, but I'm just saying you want to put in some time. You don't have to put in 13 years. I think Mobster put in like 20 years before he started, or
Yeah, 20,
25
20,
years.
22, Steve,
Yeah.
15 to 37. So, yeah, I
Yep.
was only a little bit ahead of you. Yeah.
So I mean, yeah, give us your thoughts, Mobster.
Look, something I talk about, both Steve and I do consults, we do clients, etc. And one of the things I've said on the forums, ironically, Steve, but it's not necessarily that helpful when I say it, right? And I'll get to the point in a minute. So, in terms of training and nutrition, and even to some degree PED use, all the information you listeners could possibly want is already available, right? Well, if on that basis, what the fuck are me Steve doing shows for and whatever else, right? Quite often when Steve and I do these shows, we're putting information out there in a particular way that we think is more useful than the way it's typically put out on YouTube or on iTunes and so on and so forth. The problem is, of course, when it comes to information, it's good fun and it gets you more traction if you're more out there, if you're clickbait titles and you say something that's different and that gets you more attention. Whereas Steve and I put out information, as I've said on a recent show, it's almost like an encyclopedia when you do this. You can come back and reference our thoughts on stacks, on cycles, on dosages for probably the next 10, 20 years, Steve. And the only reason that you and I will change is if something new comes along and is proven to work in a particular way. So what do we talk about when we do clients? When I've coached people in the past, and this is where I'm going to get into the motivation, the mental aspects, what makes you want to transform, what your aim is. Maybe that get leaner, become sexier, get more girlfriends, boyfriends, be attractive to the opposite sex, sexual partners, whatever, or just be a fucking beast in the gym is the mental part, the motivating part. Now, and again, Steve said it's a PED podcast. We do PED podcasts. Of course we fucking do. So we get the fact that there will be a level of success or a level of growth or more weight on the bar above and beyond what can be done naturally, certainly up to a particular point, Steve, and even for absolute freaks of strength of muscle in shorter periods of time, for example. Could a person get to 300 pounds of rip freak muscle with normal genetics? Probably not. And even if they could, and there was two identical twins, the twin take a steroid would get there quicker. There's no argument. But what about this motivation to train? What does he fucking do? Play chess when he's not on steroids? Then all these gains disappear. We've heard that line before. So no, my thought on this, Steve, is more to do with the motivation. One of the tricks that I do, if I understand that I'm going to hit a certain level of strength off cycle, I've just started in the last year, since August of last year, I think actually late July of last year, doing TRC at 59, just before my 60th birthday. Up to that point, when I did a cycle, I wasn't using steroids between. That's from the age of 37 to 59. So 22 years off steroids, then 22 years of cycling steroids. But in between cycles, I was not on steroids at all. And I didn't shrink back to my 175 pounds when I was age 18. I didn't suddenly go from a 200 kilo or 190 kilo bench back to 100 kilo bench. 190 is 418 pounds and 100 kilos is 220. I didn't lose all my gains. So that's bollocks. So I get into the whole motivation, the mental aspect more. What Steve does and what I do is we kind of more direct. We get people focused. The information's out there. We give them the same information, but we make it easy for them to get their heads around. And I say one of my tricks is to not train to try and be stupidly fucking strong off steroids. I try to maintain a good level, which is relative to everybody else, but specifically to myself, of strength off steroids. And then I will start a training cycle before I include PEDs. So I will start at a certain particular point, build up to a particular point in terms of my strength on an exercise, and then introduce the stack and then introduce the PEDs. And things like, for example, Steve, let's say that I was squatting 300 kilograms, 660 pounds on cycle. Off cycle, I'm not going to try to do 300 kilos. I might, for example, change the repetition range. I might do a different kind of squat. I don't allow it to head fuck me. I don't allow the idea of being off steroids to make me feel weak. I set new targets. I'll start doing a lot more volume. I do stuff that makes me still want to go to the gym and beat certain rep ranges and beat certain poundages, but I won't do the thing that I was doing on cycle because it can be a little bit of, it can feel like a step backwards, Steve. It can feel, look, oh my God, I can't stand not being this strong. I can't stand not being this muscular. As an example, if your thing is being lean and at some point, having got down to 8%, for example, and absolutely fucking killing it walking down a beach because that was your focus for the last 6 months. You're tanned, you're muscular, you've got a six pack going, your veins, men are looking at you, women are looking at you, kids are doing Superman things in front of you on the beach, whatever, round the pool, at the club, of a night time, chatting in the bar at the hotel where you're staying on your holiday. How much is it a sort of step backwards when you come back from your holiday, you go back to work, you go back to school, you go back to college, university, whatever it is that you do, and you lose a little bit of them. So yeah, think think differently, change differently, but make sure. For me, Steve, you and I were coaching with someone, we'd be wanting to get the fucking best for them, and some of that is geeing them up, and some of that is having them think a slightly different way. So I would argue about not being motivated to live. Now, on the negatives, I'll introduce this. It talks about him messing with his sleep. Trend. We know there is literally a phrase called trendsomnia, the night sweats, the way that your body's almost thermodynamically gone up a notch, like you've literally switched it up the oven on a little bit hotter, and your body is burning more calories, and you can almost feel this, and it kind of fucks with your sleep. We also talk about sleep apnea, Steve. I'm well over 300 pounds, and being over 300 pounds, even in my frame and at my height, is not a natural situation. Lots of strength athletes, lots of 300-pound bodybuilders, as well as strongmen, whatever. Even the shorter bodybuilders, 250 pounds. Steve and I have talked about this. The sheer size of your fucking chest, your weight of the muscles on your pecs, and the weight of the muscles on your back will, at some point, kind of actually impinge on your breathing because you're 20 or 30 pounds, even just muscle, never mind fat, muscle makes it a little bit harder. Your neck sits in a certain position. You need more pillows on the bench because your shoulders are broader. Therefore, to get the pillow height that you used to have before, you'd need more pillows just to get your head level and so on. So absolutely, Steve. Then dieting and training. When I've been full-blown competition training, ironically, one of the signs of overtraining, i.e. me pushing myself to the nth degree, I should be more tired, shouldn't I? But actually, it's that much harder to get to sleep because my body's fucking trying to recover. So I'm kind of sort of inflamed and stuff like that. So yeah, can it be? And then, as I said, specific steroids, but particularly, absolutely, the fucking trend with trendsomnia. What about other steroids do you think that fucks with people's sleep? So is it just being high T, high testosterone?
Well, what you said about, you gain a lot of size, and that definitely it can lead to sleep apnea. As humans, we're not supposed to weigh a lot. We weigh more than we should. So when you weigh more than you should, it's going to interrupt your sleep and it's going to make it harder for you to breathe properly. And there's going to be a lot of effects when it comes to your sleep. Now, with other steroids, I'll use testosterone as an example. If you use moderate testosterone, it can have both androgenic and estrogenic effects, and they will both interrupt your sleep because they will cause your heart rate to speed up. So your resting heart rate will go up, and that will make it harder for you to fall asleep. And then when you get up in the middle of the night, and a lot of bodybuilders have this problem, if you get up in the middle of the night and you walk, you go to the bathroom, then you try to go back, you won't be able to fall back asleep. A lot of older people have this experience because of poor heart health. And obviously, as you get older, your heart health tends to get worse and worse in most situations. So if your heart rate is elevated because of the androgenic and estrogenic effects of the steroids, then obviously it's going to be harder to fall asleep and it's going to be harder to get back to sleep when you get up. And then, of course, size doesn't help. So it's basically a cornucopia of different side effects that hit you when it comes to sleep. So the problem is in the intermediate and long term, and even in the short term, if you're not getting proper sleep, it's going to really have an effect on a lot of different things. We know that poor sleep over time has an effect on the brain. We know people are more likely when they get older to have brain issues because they didn't get enough sleep. Even if you're a person who can get away with only getting 3 or 4 hours of sleep, and then the next morning you wake up, you drink a lot of coffee, and you're off the walls, and that works for you. Well, long term, it's not going to work for you. It will lower your lifespan. Sleep is when your body recovers itself and repairs itself at the cellular level. So if you're going and working out and you're not getting a proper amount of sleep, your body's not going to repair after that rough workout. You see? So that's not good. So we want to make sure we get this corrected. And look, every steroid can affect your sleep, every single one, some more than others. Tren is very inflammatory in the body. PGF2A is a prostaglandin, and it hits that like crazy in the body. It's very inflammatory on all your organs. It's very inflammatory in the body. It produces a lot of heat. It affects your metabolism. It basically feels like you have a fever when you're using tren, when you're deep into a tren cycle. So that's why you're going to break out in the middle of the night with sleep. It's just like when you have the flu and you wake up in the middle of the night and your bed is drenched in sweat because your body is regulating its temperature by raising the temperature to fight off the infection. So basically your body when you use tren always feels like it's under attack. And that obviously is going to have an effect on your sleep because now your body has to do more work while you're sleeping to regulate its temperature. So tren is a very rough one on the sleep. So when you're on tren, make sure you're hydrating a lot. Make sure you have a fan on you. Make sure you have the air conditioner cranked up a couple degrees Fahrenheit below. And if you Celsius, like 1 Celsius below, that should help. And then also when it comes to tren, keep an eye on the dosing and keep an eye on how long you're using it because the sleep will get worse and worse the longer you stay on it. Um, One of the things too you got to be careful of is if you have existing insomnia problems, and a lot of people do. Um, this guy in particular, he's a younger guy. I don't like to stereotype people too much, but I think that the younger generation for the most part, uses technology a lot more than your generation mobster. But that's not always the case. I know a lot of people your age mobster who are literally zombies. They're either on their iPhone or they're watching TV or they're like 24/7. They literally have a TV in their room where they sleep. And that's zombie. Basically, you're a zombie in that situation. So, really, it's a good idea a couple hours before bed, turn off your electronics. Definitely don't keep a TV in your room. That's the number one thing you can do. And a lot of people don't like when I tell them that because they've had a TV in their room their whole life. But that, no, you do not want any electronics in your room at all. It's banned. My room, you're not allowed to bring electronics. No iPad, no iPhone. I don't care. You keep that shit outside your room. And if you need to use electronics before bed, I do because I have work before bed, so I have to use electronics. I mean, unfortunately, I have to pay my bills, so I have to use them. So what I do is I ordered blue blockers years ago, And you can buy blue blockers on Amazon for like 12 or 15 bucks. Or you could buy a more fancy pair of blue blockers for 40, 50 bucks. But if you do buy blue blockers online or anywhere, make sure they actually work. So what you want to do is you want to test them out once you get them. And there's websites where you can actually test out your blue blockers to see are they actually blocking the blue light. Another thing I do on my devices is I know on Windows, and I'm sure Apple you can do this as well. You can actually set it where the screen gets rid of the blue light at a certain time. So for me, from about 8 or 9 o'clock till about 5 or 6 in the morning, my electronics all get rid of the blue light. So I have that and I have my blue blocker glasses. So if I do watch a movie before bed or I'm working before bed, I don't have that blue light because when you see that blue light, your body thinks it's the daytime because the sky is blue. So by eliminating that blue light before bed, it causes your melatonin and other different things in your body to move in a certain direction, which signal it's time to fall asleep. So literally, those of you listening to this, I may have just saved your life by telling you to buy these blue blocker glasses and put them on. And then you'll notice, wow, you fall asleep like a rock when you use these blue blocker glasses. Get rid of all the light in your room, get rid of sound, and that actually helps. Try to sleep as naturally as possible and invest some money in your mattress and in your pillows and your blankets and your sheets and make sure you keep your room clean. I always find it
I was going to
fascinating.
say that,
Yeah.
Steve. I've literally just purchased probably the best mattress I've ever had. Ironically, it wasn't even the most expensive I've ever had, but the best one to sleep on.
I was gonna
Steve,
say, well, I was gonna
Steve and
say
I both.
people spend more on their car,
Oh,
than
please,
they
mate,
do their
or
bed.
their
But
armchair. But
you spend a third or more of your
third,
life
yes,
in your
yes,
bed.
yeah. The best mattress I've got is still reinforced bed. I have broken wooden beds, both with action and by virtue of being a heavier motherfucker. So I brought my bed from a company that's literally called Reinforced Beds. That's the name in the domain name. The mattress was probably the most firm slash comfortable one I've ever had in my life. It's actually kind of thick as well, probably the thickest I've ever had. And something Steve and I talked about, and this is just for being broad shouldered, muscular motherfuckers or whatever, is that we how we wrap ourselves. You can get a bolster or certain pillows, and I use one of the pillows off the other side of the bed, and I kind of wrap my arms around it to hold myself in a certain position. Come onto the forums and check out. Steve's written about the importance of sleep. We've done other shows where we've talked about sleep techniques. I don't have a TV upstairs. I think I brought a flat screen and then I broke it, so I haven't bothered replacing it. And I just read, and at a certain time, pretty much regularly, I go to bed. And in fact, it doesn't bother me in the slightest to go to bed early relative to most people. There's almost a thing as adults, but because we're told we have to go to bed early when we're children, we kind of deliberately stay up late. The reality is, nature wants you to go to sleep after sunset. We don't want to go to sleep quite that early, but we don't have to stay up to 11 o'clock midnight watching Netflix, hitting the
Yeah.
whole series and stuff.
Yeah, and we
You know,
had to, our ancestors, when we started evolving, there were big
yeah,
cats that basically would jump on top of you and crack your skull in 2 seconds.
yeah,
So we had to go and hide at night because that's when the predators came out. And
yeah,
before
exactly.
that,
Sleep platforms up in the trees,
yeah.
someone staying awake while the others slept, all that kind of vibe. Look,
So
the
we never
reality
were
is,
out at night. So get your
no,
habits, like those of you, let me say something. And, I'm going to give the bad news to a lot of you because I know a lot of you have these types of jobs, but these jobs where you're up like all night, graveyard shift is what they call it in
yeah,
America.
oh, it's horrendous, really bad.
It's going to take years off your life and your quality of
Yes.
life is going to suffer. This is not how humans are supposed to live. Or those of you who live in like Alaska or like Northern Europe.
Steve, you're more likely to be depressed.
Yeah.
Your actual output in terms of working at night is not as good as it is during the daytime. You're more likely to have mental illnesses. You're more likely to drink or require,
Suicidal and all this stuff. Yep.
yeah,
But the
assistance with sleep.
reason, yeah, I just want to be clear. The reason I say Alaska and northern Russia and northern
Yeah,
Europe is
because of
because,
the Arctic Circle stuff. Yeah,
yeah,
yeah, yeah.
so during the winter, you barely get any daylight. And then during the summer, it's like daylight all the time.
Yes, yes.
So that's not good. That fucks
Oh,
with
big
your
time.
brain big time and you're not able to sleep. So if you just move to Alaska during the summer, it's like daylight almost all day and you're like, shit, I can't fall asleep. And the opposite happens in the winter. You just want to sleep all day. So that's not natural and that's not normal. So there's a reason people don't live in high populations in those climates because it's
No,
absolutely brutal. So you got to really you gotta basically try to live as natural as possible, the way our ancestors did when it comes to sleep. And that ability to sleep allowed that 2 to 300 Homo sapiens to continue breeding, which has made our current population.
Yeah.
And the reason they survived, they were able to survive and breed and find food and all that stuff because they had evolve these sleeping habits. So those genes are in your body, and you must use that to your advantage, not your disadvantage. So enough of this bullshit where you stay up till 12 o'clock at
Yes.
night watching TV or fucking around with video games. You got to have proper sleeping habits. You got to be consistent with your sleeping habits. Don't go out Friday night,
Make
Saturday.
sleep as important to you as your nutrition. Make sleep as important to you as going to the gym.
And if
And
you do, you won't be affected negatively on cycle as much
yes,
as you would in a normal
or yeah, less
situation.
definitely, yeah.
All right, so let's talk about taking a hit to my wallet. So, Mobster, why don't you start us off on this one?
Right. So again, it's kind of weird because he's kind of true in two. I mean, look, I've said on other. Let me start with this then. So on other shows, we've actually talked about the popularity of certain steroids. What was number one? What was number 10? There were surveys done, and we've kind of got a price range in our mind. And I have said that on average, and I don't think this number's particularly changed too much, Steve, over the years. And in fact, I'll get into the economics in a minute. But on average, most people spend between $500 and $1,000 on a cycle. That's more or less, and especially if you're not including growth hormone or insulin or some of the more higher dosage of peptides and so on and so forth. SARMs, ironically, you're probably spending very, very similar amounts, maybe a little bit less. If we take the middle figure, we're looking at probably $750. That's averaging it out. Now, $750 on something you are really pretty much only doing for your own fucking pleasure, because most people that are listening to the show are not professionals. They do not make a living from their body. They do it because they fucking want to. They're not models. They're not doing photography stuff. They're not naked doing perfume adverts. They're not doing jersey adverts. They're not advertising sports equipment. If you're doing it because you want to look good on the beach, or if you're doing it because it makes you confident, it's for your pleasure. And so you are going to spend, on average, let's say it's an 8-week to 12-week cycle, $750. That's not the worst amount of money. But it's off the top of my head, Steve, that's about 600 quid, which is a very nice weekend away. Go out Friday, come back Monday, stay at a 3 or 4 star hotel. Don't go crazy in the bar. It's a hell of a weekend in Vegas. You'd probably want a bit more than that and so on and so forth. But here's the thing, and Steve talks about this multiple times when he says a hit to the wallet. Steve says, look, people spend more money sometimes getting their car looked after, their car waxed, stereo for the car, things you want versus things you need. You know, big screen TV, $500. And then people complain about sometimes the cost of the steroid cycle. In reality, in real terms, and I've said this recently, Steve, as you know, a few times on these shows, you've never had it so fucking good. I'd actually argue that if he said this 10 years ago, I'd agree with him. $750,000, it's a fucking lot of money. But it isn't. It isn't, because in real terms, you spent more on steroids 10, 15, 20 years ago than you do right now. When you're using companies like Euro Pharmacies, you have a greater range of steroids, peptides, growth hormones, and like than you've ever had in one fucking place, Steve. One place. Not out of the trunk of a dealer's car, not by going across the Mexican border, not by having to go around a different pharmacia in Mexico or wherever you lived trying to get different steroids, not over-the-counter type steroids, which were low dose. You've got the correct dose, clean, easy to use, and they are the best fucking prices they've ever been in history. And I'm not saying that like a selling thing. Go back 10, 15 years. Google, what did steroids cost in 2005, 20 years ago, or 2015, 10 years ago, versus 2025 as we record this show. And I guarantee you, you're probably paying the same fucking price. In fact, sometimes less. What are the vials of testosterone a few years ago, Steve? I think when Muscle Media 2000, so that would be 25 years ago, was talking about they would do articles about going to Mexico and hitting the pharmacia And they were paying $120. You can get the same fucking thing from Euro pharmacies for like $57 right now. And that is just a regular price. Companies like Euro pharmacies and their other approved sources have sales all the time. So it ends up being the equivalent of $30 or $40 per vial versus what the guys in Muscle Media 2000 were paying 100 fucking bucks. Sometimes the $100, $120 price was once it got into the States. So they were going over the border to get it cheaper. But it was still more expensive 15 or 20 years ago. So it's not quite as bad as he says when we're talking about PEDs. Now, what he also says was having to get blood work done, having to take supplements, thoughts, and opinions. And I actually agree with this insofar as that's an additional expense. But again, you're more likely to take your Steve's Hyundai, never mind a nice car, and go and get it serviced, get it cleaned professionally, vacuumed professionally, detailed professionally. You're more likely to put rims on it. You're more likely to have nice stereo, nicer speakers. You're more likely to get it tuned and consider that an investment, and especially when it comes to perhaps reselling the car, than you are with investing in your body. So, for example, we say blood work is a must. And blood work's actually kind of cheap now, Steve. Again, it used to be more expensive because it was less easy for athletes and PED users to get blood tests. Now it's easier, and there's competition for your money, for your dollars. So it's cheaper, or relative to where it was. It's the same price, but it's cheaper because you've got more money relative to inflation. Taking supplements. Again, you will put nicer oils, better washing fluids. You will make sure you're putting filtered water into the water part of your car, and then bitch about buying a organ protector or a testosterone booster or something you need to take on cycle. And for me, Steve, I think it should really be viewed as part of the cost. If you're spending the average that I said of 750, spending another $200 to look after your fucking, listen, Steve, medical insurance. So you're literally looking after your body on cycle, protecting yourself, keeping your gains, making sure your organs aren't getting smashed and damaged or whatever else, allowing your recovery to be better. And you will not moan about spending that money at the bar on holiday.
Yeah.
You won't moan about spending that money in a car, but you will moan about your body. So really, think of it in those terms. Talk about that as well, Steve.
Yeah, and if let's say you're spending $600 for a cycle in PCT, and it's a 12-week cycle and a 4-week PCT or a 6-week PCT. So if we count the PCT, it's not that much. You can divide 600 divided by 4 or 5 months. Um, it doesn't come out to much. We're talking about between $150 and $200 a month you're spending on a cycle, even if it's $1,000 cycle, and it's 5 months between the cycle, which is 12 weeks, then the PCT for another, 6 to 8 weeks, and then you're looking at about 200 a month that you're spending. That's not that much. Like, think about some of these other hobbies out there. Think about golf. Every time you go to a golf course, it costs a lot of money. The balls, every time you hit the ball into the water, which I'm sure if Mobster and I went to play golf, we hit a lot of balls in the water. I'm sure Mobster would. You know, each golf ball might cost like $2, $3, for a good quality golf ball, maybe even more, maybe $5. I think Tiger Woods, he probably uses like $50 golf balls. I have no clue. I don't know much about golf, so you
I'm,
guys can
I'm
let me. Yeah.
Let me also, I will jump in here, Steve. I agree with Steve 100%. Golfing, we've been horrendously bad. Listen, guys, let me give you two very quick tips on how to save money. Here's what a lot of people do, and this might actually be a mistake. And the late Paul Borison actually talks about this as being a great idea for a stack. What most people do is buy the stack, the PCT, etc., when they're thinking of doing a stack. But what you could do is two things. One, including Euro pharmacies, buy when they've got a sale. They've got end of line products, they've got new products coming in, so they sell the old products cheaply. There's literally on one of their distributors a sales tab that you can use to see what's a lower price, and so on and so forth. So that's number one. Number two is don't buy it the 3 or 4 weeks before a stack or cycle's about to start. What Paul talks about was buying the best motherfucking cycle you've ever done. And Paul came out with some crazy cycles over the years, but spend 12 months. So every month, if you're talking about a $600 cycle, Steve, that's $50. So $50 a month would be slightly more than that because it'd be 10 months with 2 months of the year being on cycle. But you, for the other 10 months, spend $50 or $60 a month buying a couple of vials, get some amps, get your PCT products, get your organ protector, and every single month add to your little stash, your little tub full of your goodies with your playing cycle coming up. You can allow for a little bit of flexibility. You might have some product left over from last time and so on and so forth. And then when the 2 months come around, when the 8 weeks or 12 weeks or whatever it is you're going to run, you spent the last 6, 7, 8 months putting that stack together. What you don't have to do is go out and buy it all at once. Like Steve with the golf analogy, if we don't play golf or we want to play golf, we're probably going to have to spend $2,000 just on a set of clubs. But what most people that
Yeah,
play golf,
and
yeah, they get a
boating.
club
So
at a time, Steve. They buy a club at a time. They
So let me give
upgrade
you
the
a
bag.
couple more before we move on to the next one. Partying, the drugs, the alcohol, those add up very quickly. Like rich people, like these rich people, they'll go out to a club or they'll go out to a bar with a bunch of their friends who are just tagging along just because, they get free drinks, and they're spending, tens of thousands of dollars on their tab. And so alcohol really, really adds up. It's really ridiculous. And learn to prep your own food. That's a great way to save money. If you're going every day to Chipotle for lunch and dinner, you're going every day to whatever your fast food joint is, no fast food place. Not only are you wasting your money for inferior food, but you're also putting a lot of garbage in your body because those places use a lot of crap in their food, a lot of refined oils, and these will halt your gains and really put a damper in your gains. So be smarter about your money, and you can save that $200 and then use it toward your steroid cycle, and that would be something simple you could do. Literally just food prepping at home will save you that $200 alone, not to mention the other stuff. But smoking pot and drinking and all this stuff that does nothing to benefit you, just stop doing that and you would save money. And as Mobster said, luckily Euro Pharma has high quality steroids, very affordable. They always have promos going, and you can buy your cycle and PCT for a very fair price. So let's hit the last topic. In having to get blood work and take supplement support, he was saying he was complaining about that. And look, if you come on the forum, you're going to see in my signature a link where you can get blood work and you can also save money on it. And I have a discount codes that you can use. Very important you get blood work taken before your cycle and after your cycle to see what's going on. And if something is off on cycle, you can get it done on cycle in certain situations. And blood work is important. You can go donate blood, and they'll give you things like your cholesterol levels, and they'll give you, your iron levels. They'll give you certain things as well. But it's very important to get this done to flag anything that's going on so you can correct it. And then when it comes to supplement support, look, it's very important to do supplement support because all these side effects that this guy is complaining about with the sleep issues and the heart issues and the liver support and the kidney support. Support supplements will help with that, and it'll make your cycle run more smooth. So it's very, very important to do those as well. And that's really part of using steroids. If you're going to use steroids, as Mobster said in the last segment, you have to invest money in other areas. You have to invest money in your blood work. You have to invest money in taking the proper supplements. Otherwise, you're not going to get the most out of the cycle in the first place. And otherwise, it's going to catch up to you one day. It's just like not getting your car maintained. You don't get your car maintained, you might be able to get away with it, or your pool. It's amazing that people get pools and they don't take care of their pools. And what happens is over time, if you don't take care of your pools, then it ends up costing you more in the future. Or with your teeth, you don't take care of your teeth. You don't go every 6 months to the dentist and have your cleaning done. And then what ends up happening is you go to the dentist and you're like, oh, my tooth hurts. And the dentist is like, well, sorry, you need a root canal and you need a crown. It's going to cost you about $3,000 to do that. Well, you should have been coming in. This way, we could have filled your cavity before it turned into needing a root canal. So doing the proper maintenance will save you money long term. So these are things you have to do. So this guy complaining, oh, I have to get blood work. Oh, I have to take supplement support. Dude, all the professionals that are doing good. Like you think Arnold is still alive to this day because he didn't do his blood work, he didn't do his support supplements. He took tons of supplements. the guys who don't do the proper maintenance, they're the ones who end up on dialysis at 50 years old. They're the ones who end up with liver disease. They're the ones who end up with heart attacks at a young age because they're not doing their blood work and they're not watching themselves closely. And you can't just put your head in the sand. You have to do this stuff. So if you're not willing to do this stuff, then don't use steroids in the first place. That's what I say. Go ahead, Mobster.
There's even an irony, and before I talk about Europharmacy products, there's even an irony, Steve, that the younger people especially, but it's not exclusive to younger people. Trust me, I know this. Um, are more likely to use recreational drugs, and they're quite. This is the thing that sometimes is funny when we see this on the forums. Oh, I've got to use this to look after my body. I've got to pay for this supplement because it keeps my organs protected. Motherfucker, you were sniffing dirty coke off a toilet fucking bog seat at the weekend. You've got no idea what the fucking drugs were mixed with, and now you're bitching because you've got to use something on cycle to look after yourself. Shut the fuck up. Pay the extra bucks. Be aware. And here's the thing: look, you're going to get better results from your cycle. You're going to feel better on cycle. PCT will be better. And again, guys, especially American listeners, we don't have this here in the UK. Thank fuck we don't. But you are paying lots of money every single month for your medical insurance, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of dollars as a minimum. 3, 4, 500 is not unusual. More depending on where you live, and that's just in case you have to go to hospital. Let's keep you out of hospital. Let's keep you healthy, and let's make sure that the side effects, etc., that you might get from a cycle are minimized. So your gains are better. You'll feel great about it. And so that's the importance, right? So I might give you guys shit, but it's important that we give you shit so that you understand that's what you're spending money on. That's what you're spending money on. Do not be stingy and not spend this money on other things that can help you perform better, have a better cycle, and so on. Let me just give you an example. Talking about Europharmacy products, I'm looking on Europharmacy's page right now at their TRT 400. So this is just an analogy for on reason why using a company like Europharmacy is important. We have talked about TRT, and we've talked about TRT/HRT clinics and the typical cost of a clinic. I'll get Steve to talk about the numbers in a minute. So, as an example, and this is probably a little bit out of date now as I say this, or Steve can correct me if I'm wrong, typical dose on a single monthly or twice monthly jab, injection, call it what you will, from a TR clinic averages, certainly did a few years ago, Steve, around the $200 mark. I think they love to upsell, so they're trying to sell you more likely to sell you peptides now. They're more likely to sell you growth hormone. They're more likely to charge you more, way more, in fact, for the blood tests, which are important, than perhaps the price that Steve talks about with the referral, with the discount code, and so on and so forth. Now, here in the UK and in America, if we talk about self-TRT, and we still recommend you get blood tests, just for example, using testosterone cypionate from Europharmacies, or as I say, the specialized 0.5 ml, Steve, of TRT 400, which I believe is a blend. And then you look at the cost of the idea of taking a single dose, slightly more than a clinic would probably give you anyway, of 200 milligrams per milliliter, or in this case, 0.5 ml or 400 milligrams per milliliter using the TRT 400, and work out the cost of that compared to the clinic. The clinic is way more expensive, Steve. Way more expensive. They've got to pay for staff, they've got to pay for the nurses, they've got to pay for the equipment, they've got licenses, etc., 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 just to have the clinic for you to drop in. You've got to drive there, take time out from work or school or whatever else. Maybe it's the weekend if you're lucky. The typical cost a few years ago, and this was just for a single or double, 2 times a month instead of once a month, long-acting testosterone, for example, cypionate or andecanate, was $200. What's that kind of cost now, Steve? If we weigh that up against what it would cost for a single meal once a week of cypionate or
Yeah.
0.5 ml of Europharmacist test for TRT 400, it's less than a quarter, Steve. The amount of money you save doing it yourself. So talk about that.
Yeah, definitely. Your pharmacies, there's a reason professional bodybuilders use them. There's a reason they're a top three brand in the world. There's a reason that the best sources sell their products on their website. It's because they work. It's because they have good prices. they have an ability to really mass produce their products and sell them at a really great price. So you're getting high quality at a great price. What else can you ask for? When it comes to using steroids. So they're a very trusted brand. They're one of my top three brands. I know their Mobster's the top two brand, and they're really good. And it's really cool that they are sponsoring our podcast as well, and they want to get people to do this, but they also want to get people to do this the right way. So there's a lot of different ways to talk about steroids, and we try to give you the most knowledge and have fun along the process. And these last two episodes have been a fun way to kind of look at this, but this is real life. I mean, these are the real life things. Not being able to sleep at night. These are real life things, and a big part of this as well is trial and error and learning from what you're doing. And if you're not using the proper gear, if you're ordering Primo and you're getting Deca, or you're ordering Equipoise and you're getting testosterone, or you're ordering Anavar and you're getting D-Bol, then how are you going to
Worse,
learn?
Steve.
Because you're not
Worse.
taking what you think you're taking. So this is why Euro Pharmacies is a great brand. When you order from them, you
Yeah,
know what you're taking. Go ahead.
yeah. We have seen occasionally, on probably on a weekly basis, someone will come onto the forum, Steve, and they'll mention a source we've never fucking heard of. Certainly, I've never heard of. I don't try to keep up with every single source there is. Why the fuck would I bother if I know that there's a number of sources, including Europharmacies, that I know works, charge sensible prices? I go with what I know. I go with what works. And every so often, I don't know whether to laugh or cry for the poor bastard. Someone's dropped $1,000. I think the most recent one, Steve, last week that stuck in my mind was he dropped $1,500. I know I should have listened to you guys, but this person said it was great. That person, another one was buying PEDs on social media. I'm like, if some motherfucker wants to post pictures of 20 boxes of testosterone that they've got on Instagram, that to me is an instant red flag. I do not want to buy my steroids from fucking social media. I do not want to use a source I've never heard of. And I certainly don't want to see $1,500 disappear off into the fucking ether. I can afford it, Steve. You can afford it. But I don't want to fucking give it away. It's like throwing it down the drain or setting it on fire. Could I do it? Yes. Do I want to? Do I fuck? No, I do not. I've had to work hard to get the money to be in that position to be able to say these things. And the people that we're talking about aren't in that position. They're not 60 years old with pension schemes and shit. This is their money that they've saved up. So you want a company like Europharmacies on your side. I'll refer to the TRT again, Steve. Look, one of the things that companies like Europharmacies do is listen to their customers. Number one, you want a safe source. You want minimum post-injection pain. So you want a company that's using the right kind of oils in their products. Not cheap stuff, not saving a buck by going the different way, but the slightly more expensive oil, which they buy in bulk and produce in their facilities so that they can put the products out there and have zero, or as near as damn it zero, Steve, complaints about post-injection pain. The companies that sell the products for them, the huge distributors, I'm thinking of one or two as we do this show. One is probably the number one in the world distributor with multiple brands, and Europharmacies is one of their biggest selling brands because they don't get complaints from customers because products do what they say. And as an example with the TRT, because a company like Europharmacies said, how are my customers using my products? If you was a company that sold farming equipment or gardening equipment, Steve, what kind of shovel do most of my customers want? Well, they're doing it for this in their garden. Therefore, we're going to produce this shovel that's best for gardeners. This is what they've done. They know that their customers do TRT. They know people like myself that are a certain age, 40 plus, are more likely to be on TRT. So they produced a couple of products that are specifically aimed at that part of the market. They do blends in the same way. People will take single source products, test how they feel on these products, and eventually, like myself with my Deca cycles that I've talked about on multiple shows, they will put blends together that mimic these people's cycles so you don't have to buy two products. Number one, you're saving money. Number two, the work's already been done for you. And you know that the product's good because you tried it when it was a single source. in terms of customer feedback, in terms of customer service, creating tickets when there's been issues. I've talked about one issue that happened in the past where they used, rarely, very rare for them to do that, but they used an outside contractor. The products to begin with were great, but the quality very quickly dropped off. Europharmacist was constantly checking product from this outside source to make sure that it was on point. And the moment they saw that the quality was all over the place, they pulled that product, told the distributors to pull the product, got the distributors and direct sales, and literally within, I think, 3 days, resolved every single customer issue involving that product with a credit to the next time you bought something from them, and so on and so forth. So look, guys, they are definitely out there. That's the reason why we recommend them. We love the fact that they sponsor these kind of shows, and Steve's definitely correct. Number one, number two, number three on our top list of companies that we will source products from. Please note, we are not doctors and the opinions are ours. It is our view and based on our experience and views on the topic, and podcasts are for informational purposes and entertainment only. The freedom of speech and the First Amendment applies.